Welcome to On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Vegas 81, which goes down this weekend. Back after the 1 week break, back after my 1 week holiday break as well in Turkey, and I'm looking forward to breaking some more fights down. And of course, coming off that really good event last weekend, a main event that I actually picked Grant Dawson to win, but ended up betting Bobby Green to win, simple gambling and maths, and I think it's the biggest money line bet that I've ever cashed as well on Bobby Green, so obviously really happy with that. Didn't even need to sweat for it, plus 380 that I got on Bobby Green. So yeah, coming into this event off that phenomenal last win off that main event. And we've got a good card, a good fight night here, headlined by Sodiq Yusuff and Edson Barboza. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, there's going to be a Base AI recap from last weekend. Base AI from the straight pit prediction accuracy was lower than usual last week at 40%. It's very rare that it's that low at 40%. It's normally mid-60s into the 70s, sometimes higher as well. But again, it was a bit of a strange event. So the recap video that I'm going to do is going to be more an education piece, because there was a lot of picks from Base AI that were very close to 50-50 coin flip picks where there was a big underdog in those fights, and a couple of those big underdogs did win as well. So yeah, it's going to be more of an education piece surrounding how you can use Base AI. So if you are interested in AI in general, in AI for the UFC and MMA predictions, then of course make sure you tune in. I always give a recap and talk about the fights and, like I say, how to use the AI to try and make money yourself. So if you are interested, that'll be on our YouTube channel on a Base AI specific playlist, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365. But let's get into the breakdowns, and of course, as always, we start in the main event. We've got Sodiq Yusuff versus Edson Barboza, and this is a really, really fun fight, well-matched fight. 5 rounds does it absolute justice as well, should obviously we hit the 4th and 5th round, which is another question in itself. But it's good to see Sodiq Yusuff back fighting, high caliber fighters, and I don't mean any disrespect to Don Chairez, Chairez. Look, Chairez will give anybody a fight. We saw that against Giga Chikadze, much closer than I anticipated. I had a big bet on Giga Chikadze and in that fight on that card. So yeah, much closer than I anticipated. But Edson Barboza is at that level where Sodiq Yusuff needs to be fighting, and the fact that the UFC have made it a main event, like I said, it just makes it so much better. So here we've got striker versus striker. Of course, Yusuff can wrestle, he can grapple. Barboza can grapple and wrestle as well, but we just see it more from a defensive perspective just because he is a natural striker. And because so many fighters have tried taking Barboza down in his career, his defensive wrestling, his defensive grappling, his get-up game, is brilliant. It's world class. So I don't think that even if Yusuff comes into this fight and tries to wrestle and grapple him, I don't think he'll be overly successful. I do think it's a fight that's going to be won and lost on the feet. And then even in the striking department, you've got a clash of styles in a way. Sodiq Yusuff, of course, he's got hard low kicks and he will mix in kicks, just like Barboza will mix in punches. But Sodiq Yusuff, for me, does his best work with his hands, with his MMA boxing, whereas Barboza definitely, for me, does his best work with the kicks, and I don't think anyone will disagree with that. So you've got Barboza that's going to be firing kicks at Yusuff. You've got Yusuff that's going to want to close the distance, get into that boxing range, and just rip combinations together with power. And that's what Yusuff does really well. When he gets into that pocket, he doesn't just target the head, he'll rip to the body, he'll rip to the head in combinations, powerful combinations as well. So Barboza is definitely got to keep his range in this fight, and this is where I think that, look, when Barboza's on the outside kicking, I think he's dangerous, and I think Yusuff could, or is in a situation where he could be liable to be pieced up from the outside, but I just don't think Yusuff's going to allow for that. Like, it's obvious what Barboza's going to want to do here. He's going to want to stay at that kicking range and just methodically break Yusuff down, chop at the legs, chop at the body, switch stances, and I just feel that Yusuff's game plan here is going to be just to come forwards constantly. He does have good forward pressure and good aggression, so I do think he's going to be able to get past those kicks of Barboza. I do think he's going to be able to start ripping shots off on Barboza as well in regards to being in the pocket and the boxing. And I just kind of feel that, look, more often than not, I will normally side with the kickboxer when they're fighting a boxer, but Yusuff just does such a good job, like I said, of closing the distance and getting inside. And I think that's where Barboza's actually weakest, when he's facing an opponent that is powerful and aggressive and he can't break them down easily and they can get into that boxing range routinely, consistently. That's where Barboza starts struggling, especially when that fighter's actually a really good boxer as well. So this is where I'm sort of leaning on this fight. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Barboza did stop Sodiq with something, you know, whether it be battering low kicks. I mean, we all saw what Barboza did to Hooker when Hooker was in his prime. You know, there's a possibility of that. But I just think Yusuff is such a good and effective pressure boxer that he's going to be able to get inside and he's going to be able to land the shots on Barboza. Now, I'm not 100% sold that Yusuff does cover the current betting line, which I think is around -175. I do expect that line to come down a little bit and therefore, you know, add some value into Yusuff's money line. But I do think that Sodiq Yusuff, stylistically here, is able to do what he needs to do to get at Barboza, and that's going to be where I think that Sodiq Yusuff is going to find success and get his hand raised. So for those reasons, I'm picking Sodiq Yusuff to win this fight. And in the co-main event, we've got Jennifer Maia versus Viviane Araujo. And look, when I came into this fight watching tape, you know, I did come in leaning the underdog in Araujo, but after watching tape, like, it's difficult, in my opinion, to pick Araujo to win this fight because, look, Jennifer Maia is very meat and potatoes, and I don't mean that in a bad way. You know, it's a good thing, at least, you know, in the context that I'm about to use it in. But yeah, look, she's very traditional with her strike. She's got really good fundamentals with her boxing. She doesn't overexert herself. She doesn't, you know, waste energy inside the cage. She's very well-rounded wherever the fight goes. Now, Viviane Araujo can be very hard to deal with and a bit of a nightmare early in fights. Like, we didn't see it in the last fight, and again, that was a little bit of a red flag because normally what she'll do is come out fast, hard. She'll be hell on wheels for an opponent for a full round, and then she'll start to fade off a little bit, maybe take round 2 off, and then round 2, 3 she comes back a little bit better, but still not how she could fight in round 1. So that's normally what Araujo does. And again, Araujo's a really well-rounded fighter as well. Good striking, good wrestling, good grappling. But in her last fight, she just coasted from round 1 to round 3. And, you know, it didn't look overly impressive. Whereas Jennifer Maia seems to be having a second wind in the UFC. She's beating, you know, fighters where she's the underdog. I'm sure she was the underdog in the last 2. I cashed her against Marina Moroz, I believe, as an underdog. And then I'm sure she came in against Casey O'Neill as an underdog as well. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, look, she's still she's a veteran, but she's still beating these young, hungrier fighters. And yeah, I think that she's got the skill set and she's got the experience here to be able to deal with Viviane Araujo. I think Araujo, if she does come out fast and hard, yeah, she might take that first round, but I don't see Jennifer Maia getting knocked out, and I don't see her getting taken down and subbed, because that's the other thing. Like, Maia has shown that she's more of an MMA boxer, but her background's actually in jiu-jitsu. So I think it's a difficult fight for Araujo, unless she can finish her, which I think is, you know, a low percentage probability. I do think that Maia might drop the first round, but if Viviane Araujo slows down, or if she does what she did in the last fight and tries to coast, her volume's just so low, I think Maia will be able to pressure. I think Maia will be able to crack her. I think if, you know, anybody's going to score a takedown or at least be successful with wrestling and grappling throughout the majority of the fight, that's more likely to be Maia as well, especially again if Araujo tires. So like I say, I don't think it's a great fight for Araujo. I'm not saying that it can't be competitive. I'm sure it will be. But from what I've seen of Maia lately versus what I've seen from Araujo lately, I have to lean Maia. So for those reasons, I'm picking Jennifer Maia to win this fight. Now, in the next fight, look, there's 2 really, really exceptional fights on this card that I'm really looking forward to, and this is the first out of the 2. We've got Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez, and man, I love this fight so much. You know, I think it's going to be a fight that, you know, the hardcore fan base definitely circle as the one to watch on the night, although, like I said, there is another really good fight that I'll be talking about soon. But when I initially saw the betting lines, because at the time of recording this, it's a pick'em, dead even pick'em, -110 on either side, -115 on either side. You know, the good books have got -105 on either side. So it's a pick'em fight across the board. And when I first saw the betting line, I genuinely thought that recency bias is playing a big factor in this fight, because if Adrian Yanez didn't fight Rob Font and fought Jonathan Martinez here, I do believe that Yanez would be somewhere in the region of around -175, maybe up to -200. I mean, he was that big against Rob Font, but because Rob Font got to him, knocked him out early, especially with Yanez being the favourite in that fight, like I said, when I saw the line, I thought this is recency bias, and I went into tape thinking, you know, I'm going to bet Adrian Yanez. You know, I don't see any reason why I'm not going to. But then after watching tape, I'm flipping over to the other side with the pick on Martinez. You know, spoiler alert there, because look, Adrian Yanez is going to absolutely be dangerous in this fight. And this is by no means me saying that Martinez is going to come out here and run through Yanez, because I don't believe that for 1 second. Adrian Yanez is a sharp boxer. He's still a good fighter. He just got met by Rob Font, who is also a really, really good MMA boxer. And one of them was going to go down, and it was just Yanez that went down on the night. So I'm not basing it off that fight. But like, Yanez has still got really sharp boxing. He's got decent kicks, although he doesn't kick too much. He's patient. He's got good timing, good accuracy, good power. So he's a really good fighter. Jonathan Martinez, on the other hand, when you actually watch what he's doing, and I feel like he's flying under the radar massively, Martinez, especially when you look at the experience as well. Like, Adrian Yanez is experienced, but Martinez is more experienced. Like, it doesn't feel like Martinez has been in the UFC for as long as he has, or that he has the record that he has, but he has. Like, he's a really experienced fighter, and you look at what he's been doing in his last few fights to opponents. You know, look at Said Nurmagomedov. Not many people come out with a win against Said Nurmagomedov. Martinez, you know, had Said tired. He also was on top of him a little bit as well. Like, his wrestling and grappling seems to be improving. But from a striking perspective, he's just more varied than Yanez. And this is why I think that, you know, he's going to have success in this fight, because not only can he box as well, like, look, Adrian Yanez is the better boxer, but Martinez can punch as well, you know what I mean? So the other side to Martinez's striking is his kicks. He's going to be in a southpaw stance here, so he's going to be able to kick at the open body of Yanez. He also does a really good job of, you know, the low kicks, which normally you'd find that fighters are successful with low kicks when they're in the same stance, so orthodox versus orthodox, or southpaw versus southpaw. But Martinez, in the Cub Swanson fight specifically, you saw Martinez, he's worked a lot on that opposite stance low kick, which again doesn't tend to work as well, but Martinez blasts those inside low kicks. So firing at the inside low kick, firing at the body, then going up to the head, and then he's got decent hands as well. Like, Martinez has just got more of a varied striking arsenal, whereas Yanez, I feel, is more boxing heavy. And look, Yanez could definitely go into this fight, get in an exchange with Martinez and knock him out. Like, we saw Martinez against Davy Grant. Martinez was piecing Davy Grant up, you know, was having a really good fight, and then got caught and knocked out. That could happen here against Yanez, except I think Yanez might not need to get down on 2 rounds before he does that. Yanez could come and start him early. It's just a really good fight. But obviously, I've got to make a prediction. I've got to make a pick. And I've just been really impressed with Martinez. I think he's a more varied striker. I think he can break a fight and an opponent down in more than one way. You know, he doesn't need that one-punch knockout, especially in the lower weight divisions. You know, it's good to not rely on one punch. He breaks his opponents down from the bottom up, from the legs to the body, and mixes things up really well. And then when you add your wrestling and grappling in, like, I think his wrestling's still a work in progress, but if he gets Yanez down, I think Martinez's grappling is really good as well. So look, like I've said a million times, it's such a good fight. I have to make a prediction. I have to pick a winner. And in this specific fight, I think it's pretty much a rightful pick 'em, but I am going to be siding with Jonathan Martinez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another fun fight here. We've got Michel Pereira versus Andre Petroski. Now, Pereira's supposed to have been fighting Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault pulled out 1 or 2 days ago. Petroski, to fair play to him, stepped in straight away. And like I say, it's a really good fight. Like, Petroski's got good wrestling, he's got good grappling. And Pereira, for me, is going to be definitely the better striker. Now, it's an interesting fight in regards to the gas tanks and cardios, because Pereira's obviously moving up in weight, and I think that was only a matter of time, if I'm being honest. Like, it actually reminds me of Alex Pereira, like, just way too big for the division. As soon as he weighs in, and when everyone sees him on fight night, everyone's like, oh my god, how does he make this weight class? And then, of course, obviously, Pereira was supposed to fight Wonderboy a few months ago, missed weight, Wonderboy refused to fight him, and I think that was the sign that Pereira needed to move up. Now, again, just like Alex Pereira, I feel like even though Pereira's moving up in weight, I still think that he's going to be an absolute unit at this new weight class. Again, just like Alex Pereira at light heavyweight. You know, he was a big middleweight, but when he went to light heavyweight, he was even bigger. Like, he was a big light heavyweight just because he cut so much weight to get down to the lowest weight category possible. And like I say, I see some similarities with Michel Pereira here as well. So I do think he's going to be the bigger fighter, the stronger fighter. I think he's going to be the more athletic fighter. But again, moving up in weight, you do have some question marks surrounding, you know, Pereira's at one point was known by some people, or referred to as some people, as that fighter that you just need to weather a storm against, get him tired out in round 1 and then take over the fight late. Now, I do think Pereira's gone past that a little bit in regards to, you know, a lot of that was due to the crazy somersaults and spinning attacks and Superman punches and flying kicks and all that sort of fun stuff. Pereira seems to have dialed off from that a little bit, and seems to have matured, which has helped his gas tank. But moving up in weight, the question mark is always going to be, look, Pereira's going to be carrying more weight with him this time. Is he not going to be used to having that much weight, and is he going to tire out because of that? But personally, I just think because he was so big down at welterweight, this is going to be his more natural weight class, and I think he'll be fine. Now, the gas tank questions on the other side with Petroski is the fact that this dude tires more often than not. Again, really good in the first round, but then he can slow down when he's made to work. When he's not made to work and he can control the fight and the pace of the fight, and he can get his opponents down and lay on them, that's when Petroski is better. But when he faces an immovable object, a fighter that is going to make him work, is going to defend, is going to fire back at him, that's when he tires. So I actually think when you're looking at this fight, if one fighter is going to gas, I think it's more likely to be Petroski, actually. So with Petroski, though, one aspect of his game that's really solid is the grappling. So once he gets his wrestling going, he can get on top. He's a very, very good grappler. If Michel Pereira gets taken down, then that could be a problem for him. But Pereira's got good takedown defense, and a part of that is the strength, the physicality, and also the explosivity. Fighters do find it difficult to get in at him, and this is where I think that Petroski is going to have some issues. So I do think that maybe early in the fight he's going to take Pereira down. I definitely believe that's going to happen if Petroski has that game plan, of course. But I don't think he gets Pereira out of that. I don't think he submits Pereira. And because of that, because Pereira will make him work with some takedown defense and with some grappling defense, I do think Petroski is going to tire. You know, we see it more often than not. So at that point, I think Pereira will be able to come back. And the moments that we've seen Petroski go to late in round 2 and 3, where he is tired and he's struggling to throw, you know, a good technical punch, and he's just putting every last bit of energy that he's got left in that gas tank into the strikes, I think in those moments Pereira could be able to, you know, just sit back, watch the punches come, and then counter back at him, push forwards, hurt Petroski. So I do expect Pereira to maybe drop the first round. I'm not sure whether he definitely drops it, but I do think that he gets taken down and has some time on bottoms with Petroski on top of him. But the longer the fight goes on, I think it's Pereira's fight. So yeah, potential, you know, 29-28 decision. Maybe even Pereira takes Petroski down late when he's tired, so maybe there's a late finish on the feet or a submission from him. But yeah, look, I think it's a good fight for Pereira against Petroski, who's stepping in on short notice with some known cardio issues as well. I'm picking Michel Pereira to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a rematch between Edgar Chairez and Daniel Lacerda. So these two fought a few weeks ago. If you remember, it was Lacerda that was I can't remember whether it was a guillotine choke or a ninja choke, Darce choke, but it was a standing choke, and Edgar Chairez was cranking, and Lacerda's arm, to be fair, did look like it went limp, and the referee stopped the fight, but Lacerda clearly was not out, and the fight got ruled a no contest after, the video review, which is the exact reason why you use the video review. Now, I've already broken this fight down before, so you can go back to that card and, listen to the breakdown. Again, my pick is actually not going to change. The one thing that might change, I'm still undecided yet. It'll be due to the betting line, but I did actually bet Daniel Lacerda to win as an underdog in that fight. But the thing is, I feel like I was on the right end of that bad decision from the referee. So I also bet Dan Argueta versus Ronnie Lawrence a few months ago, earlier in the year, and I felt like I was on the bad end of that. But the same thing happened. Argueta had Lawrence in a guillotine choke and was choking him, and it did look like the fight was going to be over, but the referee stopped it too soon without Lawrence being unconscious, and the fight got ruled a no contest. I kind of feel that the same thing was going to happen in the last Chairez and Lacerda fight. But again, this time it was more in my favour, for my benefit, because I do think that if that was left any longer, I do think Lacerda would have been submitted. So I kind of feel like we haven't seen the full fight. Lacerda did come out more patient, which is what I wanted to see from him. He didn't come out like a bat out of hell. He did get Chairez down. Chairez did stand back up, and obviously that's when the submission attempt happened. So yeah, I don't know. I think that even though we saw a more patient and relaxed version of Lacerda, there was still some concerns there. But then when you look at the betting line, look, Lacerda's a bigger underdog in this fight than what he was in his last fight. And again, there's probably a reason for that. Although, again, I don't think Chairez looked like the favourite he was last time anyway. It's a bit of a weird one. Like I say, I'm still going to pick Daniel Lacerda to win. I still think he's due a win. I still think he's a very skilled fighter. It's just he needs to fight in the right way. Maybe it's helped him that he's already felt Chairez in there once before, and now he can come out fresh. And, this is a catch weight as well, so both fighters can be a little bit fresher. Maybe that helps Lacerda in regards to, not slowing down, not having much of a weight cut. So, yeah, look, it's a close fight in my opinion. I think it's going to be competitive again. I don't think the betting lines reflect that. And although there's some concerns with Lacerda, there's definitely concerns with Chairez. Like I said in the last breakdown, he's not really a fighter that will overwhelm his opponents the longer the fight goes on. His volume can drop off a cliff, and he can tire out himself, although you don't really notice it because his opponent normally tires out more than him. So if Daniel Lacerda can keep that pace, maybe take Chairez late, maybe Lacerda can win a decision. Maybe he can win the later rounds with the new, style of pacing that he's bringing into the cage. So yeah, it's a close competitive fight again, in my opinion. I'm going to side with the same man I sided with last time. So I'm picking Daniel Lacerda to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is the second out of the two fights that I mentioned that are just absolutely outstanding fights on this card. We've got Christian Rodriguez versus Cameron Saaiman. And this is a fight between two very, very young fighters that are not anywhere close to the prime yet, but so skilled at the young age. Two really, really solid prospects that are well-rounded, knockout power, good grappling, good wrestling, good offensively and defensively as well. And this is the type of fight where I see and hear a lot of people say, oh, why are the UFC matching these two guys up early? Why are they putting two prospects together? They're going to kill off a prospect. And I couldn't disagree anymore. These are the fights that I love to see. I see Christian Rodriguez as a massive prospect. I see Cameron Saaiman as a massive prospect. Let me find out which fighter, which prospect, which young, hungry fighter. Let me find out which one is better. I want to know which one's better. And the best thing about this type of fight is whoever loses, it changes nothing apart from puts a loss on the record. There's still going to be a prospect. They're still going to develop. They're still going to get better. They'll probably meet again later down the line. We saw that very early on with Belal Muhammad and Vicente Luque, two young prospects back then. And again, both ended up as ranked fighters and fighting in a main event, later in the career. It literally does no harm to the prospect unless one of these fighters takes it like a life-changing beating, which I don't foresee happening. So these are the fights that I love. And like I say, stylistically, they match up brilliantly. Like Christian Rodriguez is a kickboxer, really sharp striking, more sharper on the boxing side, I'd say. Whereas Cameron Saaiman, good kickboxer as well, but sharper on the kicking side, in my opinion. So from a striking perspective, I don't see there being, that big of a discrepancy. But I do think that Rodriguez, with one fighter being the sharper boxer and the other fighter being the sharper kicker, I will more often than not lean with the sharper boxer. Where I like the kickboxer is when they've got power and good combinations in their hands and mix it in with the kicks as well. And although Cameron Saaiman will throw punches and he will hit hard, I don't think that he's as sharp as what Rodriguez is with the hands. So I do give a slight lean to Rodriguez when it comes to the striking, because if he can close the distance and get past the kicks of Saaiman, then he can make Saaiman start to exchange with punches, and that's where I think that, like I say, Rodriguez just is a little sharper with the boxing. When it comes to the wrestling and grappling, we haven't seen too much offensive wrestling from Saaiman. We've seen him on top of opponents, very calm, very composed. He can maintain a good top control with a good top position. Whereas with Christian Rodriguez, we have seen wrestling from Rodriguez. He had to wrestle against Raul Rosas Jr. in his last fight. So he does have a good level of wrestling, and he's also a very good grappler as well. So if he's on bottom, I trust him to get up more than what I trust Cameron Saaiman, but that's mainly because I've not really seen that from Saaiman, so there's no discredit there. It's just I'm trying to analyse what I've seen. So when you're looking at the striking's going to be very close. I think Simon's probably going to be more active with the strikes, but I think Rodriguez might provide the more sharper, more powerful strikes inside boxing range. The wrestling advantage I'd side slight with Rodriguez. Grappling's very close. I feel if Rodriguez is on top of Saaiman, he'll do better work than what Saaiman would do on top of him, if that makes sense. And like I say, it's just, look, if this fight goes to a decision and Cameron Saaiman's landed a ton of volume, which it looks like he does land, like he's very active, he's got good cardio as well, there's a possibility that Rodriguez gets a little bit overwhelmed in this fight and does maybe fade the longer the fight goes on. From a cardio perspective, I've seen better things from Saaiman in regards to the fact that he can keep up good activity, good volume, and not tire out. But then from the skill set side, I kind of lean it towards Christian Rodriguez. And then when you're looking at the other small aspects of the fight, you look at Christian Rodriguez, the guys that he's training with over at Rufus Sport in a camp with the Pettis brothers, Ruffy and Stotts. Like, he's got a really, really good team behind him. So I kind of feel that in where both fighters have developed, Christian Rodriguez might be slightly more developed, but will still be improving from fight to fight. But again, it's like Cameron Saaiman's activity and cardio is, it's world class at where he is. Not many fighters can fight at a high pace for 3 rounds without slowing down. So it's an amazing fight between two hyper prospects, in my opinion. Really, really looking forward to this fight. And again, got to make a prediction, got to make a pick. For this specific fight, for this event on Saturday night, I'm siding and picking Christian Rodriguez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Darren Elkins versus TJ Brown. Now, interesting fight. Look, I think if this was a couple of years ago, I'd be all over Darren Elkins here. But Elkins is obviously visibly, digressing in regards to declining and, not looking like the fighter he once was. I mean, there's the reason he's got damage tattooed on his chest. He's always been really bad for the scar tissue and bleeding and being cut open, and it's not until he does take a massive gash to the face and there's blood everywhere that he actually starts performing better. Very Chris Lieben-esque, shall we say. But on the flip side, like TJ Brown is one of those fighters I absolutely think that Darren Elkins could get at and break, because that's what Darren Elkins does. Like, he takes a beating and then breaks his opponent when they can't break him. That's one of Darren Elkins' traits over the years. But this isn't 2 years ago, this is now, and I kind of feel like TJ Brown might have something for Darren Elkins. Like, I think that a couple of years ago, Brown would have put it on Elkins. Elkins would have withstood it all and come through it, but I'm just not sure that Elkins can withstand what he used to be able to. I don't think his durability and his toughness is what it used to be. And again, there's no discredit there. That's just what happens when, you get up in age in this sport and you've taken beatings and you've been in wars. And I just feel that TJ Brown a couple of years ago would have put the beating on Elkins and not got him out, whereas this time I do think that he'll put the beating on him but get him out. So it's a good fight, a good timing for this fight for TJ Brown in my opinion. I still think Elkins might have some moments, but Brown's a good, well-rounded fighter. He's young, he's hungry, he's got decent striking, decent wrestling, decent grappling. If Elkins does win this fight, I do anticipate him getting the takedown early and getting a submission early. I think that's the way he wins, but I think Elkins is going to want to come in there and take 50k, brawl with TJ Brown, and I just think that'll be the wrong game plan. I think the early moments are going to be striking, and that's more likely where Brown's going to get him. So for those reasons, I'm picking TJ Brown to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Irina Alekseeva versus Melissa Dixon, making her UFC debut. Melissa Dixon, of course, coming from Chairez, where she was the champion out there. So yeah, she's definitely been facing a good caliber of fighters. She's well-rounded, she'll strike, she'll exchange, she can wrestle, she can grapple, but so can Irina Alekseeva. It's actually a really well-matched fight in my opinion. I think the matchmakers have done a really good job of this fight. Now, the one concern that I have with Melissa Dixon is the striking defense. She seems to be susceptible against a fighter that has good straight punches, good aggression, and will just fire straight down the middle. And Melissa Dixon doesn't really, or from what I've seen, doesn't really move her head off the center line too much. And with Alekseeva, that pretty much describes her. She's aggressive, she's tall, she's long, she'll come forward, she'll fire straight punches. And Melissa Dixon got pieced up bad in her last fight before getting the takedown and getting the finish. So I kind of feel that that's an area where she needs to tidy her game up. But I also feel that won't be fully tidied up by this fight, and I think Alekseeva will be able to, put some good punches together, aggression, and just hit Melissa Dixon. But the one thing I will say about Dixon is she is a dog in there. Like, she does not quit on herself. If you hit her, that's fine. If she's bleeding, that's fine. Guess what? She's going to come forwards anyway. And I do think that Alekseeva's got decent wrestling. I do think that she's got decent grappling. Of course, we saw the knee bar last time out, but I've got a funny feeling that Alekseeva might be breakable here. And if any fighter's going to break her in a specific fight, it's going to be this specific fight with Melissa Dixon, because Alekseeva might be one of those fights where Alekseeva comes out here, pieces Dixon up, tries to get her out of there, doesn't get her out of there, tires a little bit, Dixon takes her down and controls the fight from there. If Alekseeva's actually put on her back, both shoulders on the canvas, and she's a little bit tired and she's already overexerted herself to try and really hurt Dixon, then that might be where Dixon can really look good in this fight. So yes, it's picking Dixon is a risk because of the defensive flaws that I've mentioned, but I do think she's a fighter that can overcome real adversity and start to put it on her opponent. And I'm just not convinced that Alekseeva is the type of fighter that will handle that adversity as well. But if this fight does hit the mat, again, it's going to be quite close. I also think the striking's close. Like I've spoke about Dixon's defensive striking. Like, her offensive striking's good as well. She'll fire back and she'll get into these wars and these exchanges. So she's a well-rounded fighter. It's just I do think from a defensive striking perspective that she's hittable. But outside of that, I think she's a great fighter, and I think, again, this is a good fight stylistically. I think she'll be able to get at Alekseeva. I also think that Dixon's the more likely fighter to mix things up as well. So, look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Alekseeva comes out here, and we've seen it a million times before, these UFC debutants come in here and, be a favourite, and people expect them to win, and then they don't win, and then it looks like the underdog's a great bet. But I've got to go with what I'm seeing. And yes, there's a defensive flaw on Dixon from a striking perspective, but Alekseeva isn't without her flaws either. I think she can be got at. I think she can be worked in the clinch. I think Dixon's strong, physical. I think she'll be able to get takedowns in this fight. I think that if there's a war with exchanges, Melissa Dixon will do a better job inside of boxing range. I think Alekseeva maybe needs more of an outside range, I would say kicking range, but she's tall and long. She can fire punches from those ranges as well. So inside boxing range, I think Alekseeva's going to have some problems. I think she's maybe flawed there. It's a close and competitive fight. I'm excited to see the debut of Dixon. for this specific fight, I'm picking Melissa Dixon to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Chris Gutierrez stepping in on short notice to fight Alatengheili. Alatengheili was supposed to fight Rani Yahya, and although I would have picked Rani Yahya to win that fight, by the way, I do think that Alatengheili has now ended up with a much harder opponent. Like Chris Gutierrez, I'm not sure where Alatengheili wins this fight apart from, the puncher's chance, which is, I say this all the time, it's very probable. These are UFC caliber fighters wearing 4-ounce gloves, and one punch, one mistake can change everything. But outside of that, it's, I think that Chris Gutierrez is just a better fighter. I think if Alatengheili tries to wrestle, he's got some wrestling in his back pocket. I think Chris Gutierrez has got good defense against a certain level of opponent, which that certain level, in my opinion, is Alatengheili. I think that if Gutierrez is taken down, I think he'll be able to get right back up against a certain level of opponent, which again is Alatengheili. I think from a striking perspective, Chris Gutierrez is way more varied. Hard low kicks, mixing front kicks as well. Real devastating power in those low kicks, by the way. He can stop opponents with just chopping down at the calf. But he's also got good hands as well. He can punch. He's got power in his hands. Whereas Alatengheili is more boxing heavy. And again, it's very similar to what I said with Christian Rodriguez, with Adrian, Yanez and Jonathan Martinez. Look, Alatengheili is good with his hands, good boxing, but when the opponent is also a good puncher but then has a good varied kicking game as well, that tends to be the type of fighter stylistically that I'll lean more towards. So yeah, look, I think it's a difficult fight for Alatengheili. I think Gutierrez comes in here, I think that he can really put it on Alatengheili. I think he can shine, I think he can style on him, and outside of that puncher's chance that Alatengheili's got, I think Chris Gutierrez is, it's his fight to win. So for all the reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Chris Gutierrez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ashley Yoder versus Emily Ducote. Now, Ashley Yoder, man, it feels like she's been in the UFC for, forever. She's 8-8 as a pro. I'm very surprised she's still in the UFC as well. And again, I don't mean any disrespect here, but she's 8-8 as a professional. You don't normally see those records in the UFC. But a UFC record is actually 3-7. So in a 10 UFC fights, she's lost 7 of them. And somehow she's still in the UFC. Now, she is, to be fair to her, a fighter that's always competitive. She doesn't normally get ran through, although she has against a couple of opponents. But inside those 7 losses, she's fought some decent opponents, so it's to be expected. But she normally comes in with, a solid game plan. She's well-rounded. Again, she'll keep fights competitive, and maybe that's what saved her. Against Emily Ducote, her record's not actually too much better, 12-8, but she's, last 2 fights, you can excuse a little bit, good opponents. But she also had a good win against Jessica Penne in the UFC. Her last couple of fights in Invicta were really good wins as well. So, look, Ducote, in my opinion, is less well-rounded, although she is, she's well-rounded. She's just less well-rounded than Yoder. Yoder doesn't seem to have a more preferred style, depending on what a game plan is. She can strike, wrestle, grapple, and you don't really know what you're going to get until you're going to see it on the night. Whereas Ducote, for me, I think she's a very calm striker. She'll mix things up. Like we saw against Jessica Penne, she did a really good job of, picking and choosing her strikes, committing, putting short combinations together, and she just looks like a more trustworthy fighter in regards to being more grounded, I think, in regards to, just having a good traditional skill set, being fundamentally sound. I think Yoder's going to try and mix things up in this fight. I think Yoder's going to try different areas of mixed martial arts. I think she might have a couple of different game plans. Maybe come out striking to start with and then test the wrestling, or maybe test the wrestling early and maybe strike later. Yeah, it's tough to know what you're going to get with Yoder, but I actually think that Yoder might not know what she's going to hit in this fight until she actually gets in there, and maybe there'll have to be some in-cage adjustments. That always concerns me against fighters that aren't with fighters that aren't at that real high elite level, because at the elite level, the in-cage adjustments are a natural, second nature to some fighters. It's a natural thing to be able to adjust on the fly, whereas I'm not sure Yoder's going to be able to adjust on the fly quite as well. And again, that might lead her to, dropping a round or 2 before she really comes back into the fight. So I do think the fight's going to be close and competitive, but I just trust Ducote at this point more. It's like I say, she's more technical, she's more grounded, level-headed, more relaxed in there, and I think that she is going to go in there with a purpose opposed to having to be a little bit unsure and changing things up on the fly, and with, like I said, with the in-cage adjustments. So for those reasons, I'm picking Emily Ducote to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Terrance McKinney versus Brendon Marotte. We're supposed to have had Terrance McKinney versus Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan has had to pull out, unfortunately. That would have been, by the way, 3 out of 3 amazing fights on this fight card that will have been must watch. So really, really disappointed that McKinney and Duncan, it hasn't materialised. And I'll be honest with you, I only saw this fight announced this morning when I woke up. It's, 10 to 11 in the morning UK time now. I first saw this at about 7 o'clock, 7:30. So I've not had time to look into it, to break it down. So unfortunately, there isn't going to be a breakdown for this. I'm not going to wiki cap it and pretend I know what I'm talking about. I like to watch tape, especially when it's a fighter that, is making his UFC debut that I've not seen before. He 8-1 record for Brendon Marotte. From his record, it doesn't look like he's fought the best level of competition. So it kind of strikes me as this type of fight that we've seen a million times before, where a fighter needs an opponent after a pullout, and the UFC have just pulled a local guy off the regional circuit who just happens to be available and ready, and that UFC fighter absolutely runs through the opponent as like a -500, -600 favourite. The opponent takes a loss, but also gets a UFC contract with that, which I'm always happy about for that fighter. So, I will look into the fight, but unless there's anything different, I'll put it in the description on the YouTube channel and the video. So I do feel it's going to be that type of fight. The betting line's not out. I do expect McKinney to be, massive number and run through Marotte, and then Marotte might come back and get another fight and do well then. But yeah, for this specific fight, I've not looked into it, so the breakdown's tough, but I just imagine that it's going to be one of these fights that we've seen a million times before. So yeah, my pick now, based on not a lot, is going to be Terrance McKinney, and I kind of feel after tape, and if you listen to other breakdowns as well, other people breaking fights down, I kind of feel that maybe people picking Marotte to win is going to be few and far between. So yeah, Terrance McKinney's the pick. Next up, we've got Tainara Lisboa versus the newcomer Ravena Oliveira. So yeah, look, I think it's going to be a difficult debut again for Oliveira. I think that from what I've seen of her in tape, her best attribute is probably her strength and size. Although actually she doesn't look that big, it's more the strength. She seems like she's one of these really deceivingly strong fighters. Likes to pin her opponent up against the cage. She will score some takedowns, but very from what I saw, very Holly Holm-esque in regards to just happy to be pinning her opponent against the cage and, working little bits at a time, enough for the referee not to separate them. And if the referee does look like he's close to separating them, maybe just get that quick trip takedown. So yeah, with Oliveira striking out at range, man, that looks very, very green, and that's me being polite. So with Lisboa, she's a very calculated striker. I believe she's a Muay Thai champion. So I think if Oliveira comes into this fight firing these, wild, crazy, untechnical strikes at Lisboa, I think she's going to piece her up. But then even when you look at the wrestling and grappling side of things, I think Lisboa is probably going to be the better grappler here. Just a better overall fighter. I think the one area Oliveira might be successful is if she can tie Lisboa up against the cage and force her there, make her be in a fight where she can't move away from the cage and just chip away at the clock and just chip away at a few strikes. But it's hard to pick that type of fighter to win a fight where because that's the other thing as well. The thing that I find hardest about analysing fights is figuring out who's going to be the stronger fighter inside the cage. I've gotten it right a lot of times, but I've also gotten it wrong a lot of times, and sometimes it's the difference maker. There's times where I thought, this fighter's definitely going to be stronger in the clinch, and then it's not been like that at all, and I've been like, shit, well, it's just really difficult to gauge until you see that first engagement inside the cage. So yeah, look, I'm saying that Oliveira might be the stronger fighter, but I'm not sure. And even again, it's hard to pick a fighter where their best path to victory is pinning their opponent against the cage and working them from a physical perspective, because we don't know that until they first tie up. So yeah, look, Lisboa is the much better striker, in my opinion, the much better grappler. Wrestlers, we don't really see either fighter wrestle too much, just a trip takedown here and there. But yeah, I think there's a massive discrepancy on the feet for Lisboa, enough to the point where, it's hard to pick against her here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Tainara Lisboa to win this fight. And finally, we get to a fight that I don't know if it's actually going to be on the card. It was rumoured and spoken about last weekend at UFC Vegas 80, but I'm including it in the podcast just in case it is added later in fight week. I'm sure they're just making, an assessment on the fighters and seeing what's good. But we've got Philippe Lins versus Ion Cutelaba. So this fight should have happened last weekend. Lins pulled out on fight night again, as the card is about to start. Some medical issue. I don't really know, and I'm sure they're not going to release it, but they say it's a medical issue, but we don't really know what it is. Like last time, I thought it might have been, like a stomach bug. He's eaten some dodgy food. It's actually happened to one of our fighters. Obviously, I manage fighters, so it's actually happened to one of our fighters where he pulled out an hour before his fight just because, without sounding too gross, he was shitting through the eye of a needle. With food poisoning, and he tried to make it and it stopped and it started again, and there's a lot of things like that can happen. But like 2 times I think this year for Philippe Lins, I don't think that's food poisoning or a stomach bug. It might be more of what was rumoured to be happening with Tom Breeze in regards to the the nerves and the stress levels and him not being cleared because of that. We don't know, we're just making assumptions, but there's definitely something, in my opinion, not quite right with Lins. But when he gets in the cage, he's a good fighter. It's just this: if this fight happens this weekend, I liked Ion Cutelaba before, by the way. I know obviously I didn't do the breakdown podcast last week, but I would have picked Ion Cutelaba to win. And I think that he's got a good stylistic fight here against Lins, but then add this in with Lins and, he's already cut weight once. He does seem to be the bigger fighter who cuts the more weight. And now he's having potentially pre-fight issues on fight night. Yeah, there's a lot of things that point to Cutelaba winning this fight. Again, should this fight be made on Saturday night. So, yeah, look, I think Cutelaba's got a power advantage, a finishing upside. His wrestling, I think he'll be able to get at Lins with. Of course, Lins has got some power as well. If Ion Cutelaba does come out too hard in round 1 and fades round 2 and 3, that's where Lins will start looking better if Cutelaba doesn't get Lins out of there. But Cutelaba's been fighting a lot smarter lately. So even against Barboza, he dropped Barboza, hurt him, decided to double leg him, and first of all he tried to knock him out on the feet, realised very quickly that it was overexerting energy and he was about to gas himself out trying to get the finish. So then he decided to double leg him, take him down, get on top and just ground and pound him out, which is super smart. So there's evolutions to Cutelaba's game as well. And like I say, you add all that up in regards to the finishing upside and the improvements that he's been making from a fight IQ perspective as well. And then with Lins, something not being quite right with him. Yeah, the signs point to Cutelaba. So if this fight does happen, if it's made, which I hope it is, by the way, because it's actually a really good fight, I am picking Ion Cutelaba to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. It's good to be back. It's good to be breaking fights down again, especially coming off 2 really good back-to-back winning events as well. Last 4 bets all won. A few underdogs in there as well, which is nice. The majority of my bets are usually underdogs, so yeah, it's good to be back breaking fights down and having fights back in our life. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. For those that have subscribed to the YouTube channel as well, always really appreciate that. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, whatever it is, wherever it is that you listen, then please jump over to our YouTube channel, drop a like, drop a subscription to the channel. When I say subscription, it's a YouTube subscription, so it's not something that costs you. And, if you want to tell me who you're betting on, which fighters that you agree with, disagree with, let's have a conversation as well. It is me that replies to the comments on the YouTube channel, which again is youtube.com/MMA Play 365. Aside from that, I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.